Oh, we talking over here. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Is this on? Yeah. Okay. David Mintz, have a seat. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jay Brown, president of the Captiva Community Panel. I don't have any role in this tonight other than just to launch the meeting, and glad to see this great turnout. We're all going to learn a great deal tonight about what happened, what went right, what went wrong. And most importantly, we want to get a lot of feedback from you all too, to increase the level of understanding we have. Tonight is a presentation, a joint presentation by the Captiva Community Panel and the Captiva Erosion Prevention District. Some of you may not be aware of the roles of these two organizations in Captiva. The panel is a group of 11 community volunteers that advocates for the interests of Captiva to Lee County. We live in unincorporated Lee County. We're not a city like Sanibel is. And so we're just this tiny little part of unincorporated Lee County, and it would be very, very easy for Lee County to overlook the needs of Captiva if we weren't active in dialogue with them all, advocating, stand up and yeah, there's John Jensen, Margaret Neville, David Mintz, Linda Laird. Thank you for being here tonight. The other sponsor of this event is the Captiva Erosion Prevention District. Captiva Erosion Prevention District is charged with keeping the shoreline of Captiva, preserving the shoreline. What?
I'm going to fix this for everybody at home.
Okay.
Actually, we are going to fix one of this. I can see it. Do I need to stop sharing so they can see? Okay.
I thought I was doing fine.
Here you go, and everybody can
Okay,
see.
thank you. Okay, so the Captiva Erosion Prevention District is charged with preserving the natural shoreline of Captiva. The district has 5 commissioners who are elected by the Captiva public, and then they have an administrative staff headed by Daniel Munt, who will be speaking with us later tonight. If there's members of the CEPD here tonight, please stand. I'd like to recognize you. There's Dick Pyle. And Linda Laird, as well as being on the panel, is also on the Captiva Erosion Prevention District. She's a very, very busy lady. Okay, well, I just wanted to get us started tonight. And again, I want to emphasize that a big part of this is to communicate a lot of information to you all, but we hope to get a lot of feedback too, so that we can learn from you what your experiences were during the hurricane. And with that, Linda, unless there's something else you'd like me to cover, I'm going to turn it over to you, Linda is the chief architect of the meeting tonight. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Joe. Now what do I do here? Yep. You know, the other real sponsor of this meeting is the Captiva Civic Association, who has this space for us and willingly donates it for our community. So this is a community debriefing. And the point of it is, so we all talk about the hurricane, we all talk about what we think went right, what we think went wrong, and what actually did happen. So we're going to, here's our agenda. We're going to have Chief Jeff Paul to talk a little bit about Captiva Day 1, but we have a more than able replacement in our Lieutenant JT, right? Is that it, right? TJ. I'm a little TJ. Okay. Next up will be Dr. Carrie Schumann from SCCF. She's going to talk about what happened from a scientific perspective. Daniel is going to talk about what happened with our beaches and our dunes. First view as to how we do, what I think went well, as well as the people I've talked to, and where I think we could use some improvement. Then we want to hear from the Captivans, that would be you all, on how did we do and what do we need to be working on for the future. Okay, so thank you all for being here too. Day 1. And what I want to do is, I thought we're both here doing on the first one.
All right, as you see, I am not well, I am Lieutenant Klein or TJ or JT, if you will. You know, I first like to thank you for inviting us here to explain what happened day 1. A lot of people weren't here day 1. Well, hopefully you weren't here day 1. You know, so some people were. It's okay, and just kind of shine a light to it. So, you hear me well? No, you can hear me well though. I was told about this. I need to speak into the mic, so I don't know how well I'm doing because I project well by myself. So, so day 1, wow. So day 1, we were not here actually when the hurricane hit. We evacuated to Fort Myers Station, and we awaited the time where we can come back to the island once the hurricane passed. And we weren't able to come back to around 06 in the morning. And we came by via boat because of the fact of the matter that there was no causeway, which we were the first ones who got to find that out. So that kind of hindered logistical issues that we had. So we had to break up our teams. All the Captiva Fire Department responded, but we had to break up how we were going to respond because we didn't have enough room on our boat with the resources that we needed. So I was part of the first chalk to actually find a slip to park to get boots on ground and describe the scene. I guess tragic, really. I became accustomed to Captiva, sunshine, you know, beautiful homes, beautiful residents, wonderful. It's a wonderful place to be, you know. And I haven't had to go through a hurricane at this magnitude. So to see Captiva like that, it was kind of rough, you know. I mean, just being able to see the docks, what docks we can go to, we already knew what kind of situation we were coming up on. So once we got there, we parked close to Old Lodge. We went straight to the fire department to see if the building's still there and how much resources we had there. to mount a large scale search. And once we gained access and stuff, the roads were, you really couldn't get by on a vehicle. I'd say vehicle before we started clearing from the fire department is the location obviously we use. North of us, maybe Old Lodge. There was too many trees now, large trees. And I would say around Sunset Captiva for the south part. Everything else was, you couldn't negotiate it with any kind of vehicle, even maybe a four-wheeler if you took the beach. The amount of sand and flooding was great. By the time we got boots on ground, there wasn't as much water, but just the residue of everything, mud. And well, a lot of you got to see that, you know, at your homes, unfortunately. So our first priority was, you know, evacuation of the citizens and residents that were still remaining. And we did have some locations and everything out there. But like I said, it was a logistical nightmare, being that how are we going to get people off? You know, just pretty much filling the scene, surreal hitting you, you know, as in food, water. There obviously no electricity, no water on the island. So how much could we really do? We did have an engine still on the island. And lucky for us, like I said, we pre-planned this, we drilled this. So we had our boat and our main engine on the mainland. So that's the reason why we were able to get here. But as in front of Tween Waters, I don't know how early y'all were able to make it back. But Tween Water, it wasn't really trees that blocked you, but it was pretty much the beach. It was how the beach looks right now was all in front of Tween Waters. So even if you did get through the trees, most people would get stuck in the sand. It was pretty deep. And so our first priority was obviously to search, make sure we got evacuated people out, which we did. Most people, to our luck, was in actually good physical standing position, you know, so that was good. Maybe not so much mentally, because I couldn't imagine how it felt to be out here. So our first day was search. So we went to everyone's home. We made sure that if you were there, that we would find you. We searched all the properties, and being that we didn't have road access, you know, we pretty much just did it by foot, you know, and we did it pretty much to the close of the day. Chief Powell started out, obviously we needed someone logistics on the mainland since we couldn't get here and we didn't have the resources that we needed for initial response. So we needed someone to coordinate that. So between him and Sandoval's chief, they orchestrated a nice little search, and that's where they manned for the first day. And then Chief Powell arrived shortly after, you know, either pat us on the back or just like, do better, you know. So if you know him, that's pretty much how he is. Oh, apologize for that. So besides that, I know a lot of y'all were able to come a few days afterwards. We definitely did our best to make sure that the roads were navigable. You know, you can navigate at least through it safely, so we can have engine access just in case anything happened. But like I said, we didn't have any water, so the only water we had was in the engine itself. So we try to mitigate a lot of things, as in shutting generators off, things like that could cause fires. Carts as well. You know, with the golf carts coming up, that was a big thing. You know, all of a sudden golf carts are blowing up. You're like, we don't have water, you know? So, but day one, that wasn't on day one, but that was a continuous effort. But day one was pretty much just tiring search. And that was to the end of the day. So from 06, we reallocated resources as much as we could, established a command, pushed out, and I guess you would say carnage, because like I said, from what you're used to seeing Captiva as, it was the first time. I wasn't here during Charlie. I didn't start working at Captiva until 2011, so I had a fortunate, nice little stretch there that didn't have to see such atrocities, I guess. but like I said, most people that actually all people that were reported when we first hit the boots on ground, we were able to evacuate. Other residents who were visiting and didn't know the capacity of the storm or what it's like on an island when a hurricane's coming. We got them evacuated out, and for that day one for the resources, I would first like to say thank you to the community and business owners and stuff like that. We would without Twin Waters, we wouldn't have been able to clean the road as fast as we did. Without South Seas, those big trees, I mean the manpower that we needed. You see our station, as beautiful as it is, it shows you our maining. We only have one station, so even with everybody, 100% of people here, you know, for the first day, for the first week, you know, it's a lot of work to do, especially without any resources. We did have sheriff's office helped us a lot with logistics, and they bunked up with us. You know, they got to pretend to be little firemen for a little bit. You know, they were excited. Upset that we don't have a fire pole, but they were excited, so it was good. But they were great help, especially for transportation wise. The broom closet. They got the best room we had. All right, it was a window view, all windows. It was the best. It was honestly the best we had. You know, and plus they didn't want to live with us upstairs. You know, like I said, you know, without water, you know, showers were kind of limited to zero. So. But like I said, everyone worked really hard, and without those residents who did help, there were some actually residents who let us utilize like a Jeep or something like that, just something small that we can accommodate getting resource to point A to point B, and that was actually very helpful. So besides for day one, that's pretty much all that we was able to do. You know. I mean, to go in detail, like I said, it was mostly just tons of debris and tons of debris being trees, vegetation, parts of homes, you know, so sand. So that was the biggest obstacle. And once we started getting that, our resources done and getting everything rolling, day 2, day 3 happened faster. You know, everything was able to move faster. So, that's just one. All right. So, but at this time, I'm sorry, but I will not be taking any questions. But if you do have questions, please email my chief. I can give you his email. You can stop at the station and it's on our website. Please email him and ask your questions. This will by request by chief because he wants to be able to answer them. And this is the kind of guy he is, you know, so not saying anything about me, you know, but you know, he makes sure to say that, you know. So, but yeah, so but I do thank you for this opportunity to come out here and speak to y'all, being in person or virtually. Yeah, there I didn't actually see that camera there, so I didn't know where I was searching the crowd. I was like, where's the camera? It's right there. So, but thank you.
Sure, I guess. I think TJ really hit a lot of the stuff on the head, but the one thing that I wanted to do was just to bring up that. There we go. What we had always told you guys in all of our hurricane preparation meetings and seminars and everything is that we don't have an interest in keeping you off of the island any longer than you have to be gone. Okay, so, you know, TJ hit on the immediate goals we had to do, which was, you know, securing things that were an imminent threat to human life and safety. After that, we were happy to have people come on back. You know, we don't want you to stay on the island against sensible advice with a storm coming. There's nothing you can do once that storm is here, and we're not here. So if you're calling for help, there's nobody that's going to be coming until after the storm is gone. Whatever you can do about a hurricane, you can do in preparation. Once it's here, there's no human strength. I mean, you look at the damage down on Fort Myers Beach, and we were lucky we had some of the eye come over here and spared us a lot of the worst of that. But there's not really a good reason to stay here. And the half of that becomes our promise to you is that we are trying to get you back as quickly as possible to protect your houses. You know, we're here to protect life and property. And once we secure the immediate life threats, then we're happy to have you guys come in and open up your houses and pull out the carpets and couches and cut out drywall The one thing that we also asked people to do was to not run generators after the first couple of days until we had the fire hydrants recharged. TJ mentioned the pumper truck we had out here. What's that got, like 800 gallons? Okay, you can put out a Cub Scout fire with that. So when about 2 or 3 days after the storm, this place was dry as a tinderbox. And when we came out, everything was still green, but it went totally dry, fire hazard, like, code red fire hazard, whatever. I don't know what your term would be, but definitely high fire risk. So, a lot of people, their generators are not regularly maintained, and the chainsaw people are digging out of the garage where they'd taken off the spark arrestor to service it 10 years ago, the last time they looked at it. We just asked people not to run those things until we had the protection of water through the fire hydrants. And that was also what was critically important about clearing the road. It wasn't just so you guys could get to your houses, even though that was a happy side benefit of that. What we were trying to accomplish with that was to create a response corridor that we could get a fire truck down and we could access all the properties. The other thing that worked very well is when people were coming back, you guys were stopping by the fire station and letting us know that you were on the island and where you were going. Because as TJ said, once we've searched the island and we've been to your house already, we're probably not going to be back there unless there's a reason to be there. So if you just go to your house and nobody knows you're there, and a tree falls on you, or you fall through a unsecured floor or something like that, nobody's going to go looking for you. So what we'd asked was people just come in and check in with us and say, hey, we're going to be over here at the property. And it gave us an opportunity to give people some advice too. Hey, if you're going there with 2 or 3 people, leave somebody outside so that if something happens on the inside, somebody can go for help. So those were things that we learned on the fly, also as safety things. But the main thing is I just would like everybody to pay attention to the evacuation warnings. Don't feel like you have to stay. We'll try to get you back as soon as practical. So, yeah. All right.
Thank you so very, very much. Very, very much. Next, we've got Carrie, who's from SCCF, who's going to talk about the storm.
So give me just a moment to get things set up here. Okay, and we are going to share the screen. I think we should be in good shape. So hello, everybody. So this is going to be pretty brief. Really what I'm doing is just sort of reminding us about some of the sort of physical conditions that we went through during the storm as a way to sort of set a little bit of context for some of the additional conversation that's going to happen here tonight. And so again, I'm the Coastal Resilience Manager at SCCF. I also work in partnership with the Captiva Erosion Prevention District. And I also work with other partners, including the community panel. Again, so it's just going to be sort of just a little brief overview. And I have to fight my desire to walk around too much because I like to do that and I like to point to things. But so probably a lot of you are really used to seeing that comparison to Charlie, and I'm going to dig into that comparison as well because I think that's a really useful mental anchor for understanding sort of what was the same and what was different between these two storms. So we can see here that they had some similar aspects. They both made landfall in Cayo Costa. They had similar pathways. So you could see Charlie on the left there. Actually, I'm going to see if I can use a pointer here. There we go. Can you see my laser pointer here? Okay, cool. So you can see Charlie's pathway right here. You can see Ian's pathway over here. You can see that they both went on to affect a similar region in South Carolina. Okay, what makes these storms different? So it's really a lot about size and speed. So first, let's dig a little bit into Charlie. Let's look at what were some of the details about Charlie. So that's a picture on the left where that's showing Charlie. It's basically an infrared photo essentially of Charlie before it reached Florida. And there's a couple numbers that might not mean too much until I show you them in comparison to Ian's. So we had an eye that was about 5 miles wide. We had a wind field around Charlie where the hurricane force winds right outside that eye had a diameter of about 50 miles. And the tropical storm winds around that, the full diameter was about 170 miles. The speed of Charlie, it crossed the state at about 15 to 25 miles per hour. And it crossed the state in approximately about 7 to 8 hours. So maybe that doesn't mean so much until you look at what Ian did in comparison. Okay, so here's a similar picture of Ian before it reached Florida. And so what you're seeing is you are seeing a much bigger storm. So that's one really key piece. It's a much bigger storm. So you can start to see how some of these numbers compare. So the eye width for Ian was about 8 times that of Charlie. If you look at the hurricane force winds, the diameter of those winds was about 90 miles as compared to Charlie's 50. Okay. And then you see the tropical storm winds spread out. The diameter of that was about 350 miles compared to Charlie's. So again, much bigger storm, right? And so we have a much wider field of impact across the parts of the state that it reached. The other really key difference, and it's something we are starting to see with storms, is we're starting to see some slower storms. And so if you look at the speed of Ian, it was only going about 8 to 9 miles per hour relative to Charlie, right? So that means a much slower storm. And what that means is you have, this is similar to like Hurricane Harvey, where it sat for a long time and it was able to drop a lot of rain. And so the fact that the storm sat for a lot of time here means there's a lot of wind energy that helped build up those records amount of storm surge. So really the key difference here is you've got a much bigger, much slower storm. Really what that's resulted in is, so Ian is the 3rd costliest storm in US history, and it's now come in as the costliest storm for Florida on record. It also was the most deadly storm for Florida since the 1935 Labor Day hurricane. So it was really significant. It crossed over the Dry Tortugas as a Category 5, and when it made landfall close to us, it was just shy of a Category 5. So we're talking a very high intensity Category 4 storm. Okay. Now, one thing I want to direct you to is the fact that the National Weather Service has just put out a really good report on Hurricane Ian that just came out this last week. And if you're really interested in a sort of overall regional picture, that's a really good place to look to understand a little bit more about what happened. The one thing I will say that is complicated for understanding what happened on Captiva and Sanibel is that we don't have as much data as you do have for areas like Fort Myers Beach. Some of that is we just don't have as much instrumentation. Of course, one of the things you'd expect in a storm as well is some of that instrumentation gets damaged or interrupted by the storm. So I'll show you a couple data points that we do have. Some of you may have heard about SCCF's Recon network, and it's basically a network of sensors that for the most part are really meant to record water quality data. So normally that might mean oxygen levels, a lot of things that might be associated with red tide, but some of our locations will also capture wind data, and we do have one wave buoy. We did have one other buoy, I'll show you a couple of these locations in a second, that does record some water level information, but that one stopped recording before the storm even really made landfall. So these are a couple of the locations that we do have a little bit of data on. So again, we've got a bunch of sites, but not all of those are taking that particular information for us. So for wind speed, so we had sustained, we do have one buoy. So this was recorded at 3 sites, have information on wind speed, but I think the one that will be of most interest to you here is what was recorded at Redfish Pass. So for Redfish Pass, what we saw was sustained speeds that peaked at about 94 miles per hour. So sustained wind that was close to your 100 mile per hour mark, and peak gusts. So gusts are really when you have, you know, those short bursts of wind that are about 2 seconds or so. So we saw bursts of wind about 126 miles per hour. But over in Cape Coral, we had a record of 140. So it was, even though it was definitely a storm surge event, this wind was significant. The other thing is we've got a little information on wave direction. So this is a wave buoy that FCCF runs. And essentially what it recorded was when the storm came through in terms of the directions of waves, they were originating from the southeast, and basically from when the storm basically reached our area to, I think it was at least maybe 2 or 3 days after, you saw the waves come in this direction, originating from the southeast and traveling towards the northwest, at least as recorded by this particular buoy. Now, here's the thing that gets a little tricky. So storm surge is definitely going to be harder to characterize specifically for Captiva. Ultimately, in a couple minutes, what I'm going to show you is something called inundation, and I'll show you how that's different from storm surge, but I'll show you why we don't have a lot of storm surge data. So storm surge, really what we're talking about is we're talking about the amount of water that gets added by a storm on top of normal water levels, okay? And so usually that's driven primarily by wind during a storm. And we have a couple, 2 or 3 measurements of it on Sanibel, and I have one data point from that National Weather Service report for Captiva. So what you can see here is the storm surge. You can see a couple points. You can see Sanibel. And so basically these were little recorders that were put out by the USGS, the United States Geological Survey. So they recorded at the end of Sanibel, roughly about 12.5 feet. And then there was one recorder that is somewhere in Sanibel. I don't know too much about the location, but it recorded somewhere between about 3 and 6 feet. So at least what tells us, we don't have a lot of data, but we know that surge was probably experienced a bit differently depending on the location around the islands. However, something that could be useful for us that we have a bit more information on is something called inundation. Hold on, I'm trying to find my cursor. Okay. And so inundation is really saying, okay, we've got storm surge, but storm surge as it's affecting these islands, you have to account for the fact that the island is not at sea level, it's elevated. So really what we have more information on is inundation, which is that part of the storm surge that was experienced above ground level. So we do have some data points essentially saying, this is a little bit more like what you experienced in your house, the amount of water that you experienced in your house. So let me show you a little data around that. So again, this is going to be water above the ground, okay, above ground level for us. And so the USGS came out and took a lot of data points for Sanibel, but they sort of stopped and didn't take any for Captiva. So I went out with a colleague and we took what we could for Captiva, but I think it's helpful to at least start to paint a picture of what we were seeing. So what we did is we went out and we looked for what you call high water marks. You guys were all familiar with these probably in your house in different locations. Usually you see maybe something like a seed line, you see a mud line, a water line. So we used those and we measured the height above ground, and essentially they got plotted out. So the top row there, what that is those are the data points across the whole island. The bottom is what we call interpolation. It basically is an estimate about what the water levels might have looked like in between those data points. I think the really key thing that I want to just give you is just the general patterns that we saw. And that's really the important thing to get out of this. So Sanibel had a much wider range, so between about 0 to 10 feet. And Captiva, what we saw as a general pattern is between 0 and 4 feet. Now, I will tell you, I would not be surprised to find out that there might be some outliers in this room. So there, of course, is probably some restrictions to some of the data we could get, but this is probably the general pattern that we were able to detect from going out to get those high water marks. So really, that was all I wanted to do, to just paint a simple picture of some of the conditions that were experienced as a way to sort of set the stage for some of the other talks that are coming up. Do we have time for me to take a couple questions? Hi, Jay. Feel free.
Yeah, so what you're saying is,
I think we're going to need to, just as a note, I think we're going to need to hand mics to people so that our listeners at home will be able to hear what the questions are.
okay, so Carrie, inundation is the height of the water minus your elevation above.
Essentially. So The one thing I will say is it's probably a little bit more complicated than that because storm surge can interact with, natural landscape and buildings. And so that probably has some influence, but if we're going to simplify it, yes, I would say that's how you, yeah.
Water lines.
Yes.
Houses, measuring inundation.
Yes, we're measuring inundation, right? Yeah. Yes, so that is, yes, so that's inundation, yes.
Which then implies, since I'm at 8 feet of sea level.
That it,
the highest-
yeah, so it could have pointed to potentially 10 feet of storm surge. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Yes.
You have an explanation for the difference between Sanibel and Captiva for the soil inundation?
I think, so this is a complicated one. So, I've talked to a lot of people about this and, I think that the largest answer is that I can give you a little speculation, but I'm not sure that, first of all, I'm not a hydrologist. I'm not, but one of the things that was at play was orientation of the islands. So you can, when you look at that pattern happening across Sanibel, you can kind of clearly see that you ended up getting an awful lot of surge at the area. Show the weight, Billy. Right, to go back to the direction that water was coming in. Right. Yeah. So there's lots of factors, but certainly orientation, I think everybody would agree that orientation was partly to play. At play. I mean, that would most likely be wind driven. I mean, it was, oh, sorry. Right. Okay. So just so our folks at home can hear. I think probably we're going to keep things moving. I will be available after to answer any kind of additional questions. So if you hold on just a second, I'm going to get Daniel. You can introduce him and I will get him ready.
Daniel is the executive director of the CEPD, and he's going to tell us more about what happened with our dunes and how we're going to get her to do.
I just need to turn this real quick. Okay. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Linda. As Linda mentioned, I'm Daniel Munt, the Executive Director of the CEPD. So I want to talk a little bit tonight to you about the performance of our sand dunes and how they were important in surviving the hurricane. But first, I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about the history of beach projects on Captiva. The first island-wide nourishment occurred in 1988 and took a whopping 1.6 million cubic yards of sand. Following that beach nourishment, we've routinely maintained the beach on every 8 to 10 years with a spot nourishment here and there. Our most recent beach nourishment concluded in November of 2021 and took nearly 850,000 cubic yards of sand. So here's some historical pictures that we tend to take every beach nourishment at the same point, just in front of Tween Waters before the Jensen's Curve. As you can see, the upper left picture is 1988 pre-construction, how the dune looked, and the upper right is post-construction, where you can see the wide beach as well as the dune plantings. The bottom left picture shows how that same area looked following the nourishment that occurred in 2021, and the bottom right shows how it was post-Hurricane Ian. All right, so there are storm damage protection properties of beach nourishment. It's factored into the engineering. This engineered to provide storm protection and up to the upland property owners, and increasing the width of the beaches reduces the dune erosion, which prevents overwash by diffusing the wave energy. This table to the right is taken from our economic benefits report done prior to the nourishment, and you can see that nearly 30% of all benefits related to nourishment are attributed directly to storm protection and damage reduction. And so let's talk about the purpose of sand dunes. The beach and the dune system is the first line of defense in storms because it acts as a buffer between the storm waves and the coastal development or infrastructure. During storms, the waves reach the beach and dunes before they get to the upland property. And the beach and dune systems absorb that wave energy to reduce the damage to the upland structures. So what we did during our previous beach nourishment in 2021 is we specified out 30,000 cubic yards of sand to create a 20-foot dune crest along the entire stretch of the island. This dune crest was planted with 350,000 dune plantings consisting mostly of sea oats. Feel that the beach nourishment did its job. The beach project was pretty effective in providing storm damage reduction benefits by absorbing some of that wave energy and protecting our upland infrastructure. And it's estimated by our engineers that nearly 50,000 cubic yards of sand were lost from the beach and dune system on a dry beach. Just have a few pictures of some of the properties along the beach that sit behind some of the dunes. This is the Mucky Duck. As you can see, it sits behind a pretty extensive dune system. And it's fairly, managed pretty well considering the hurricane. Up the beach a little bit further, attitudes did not fare quite as well due to the lack of dunes in front of that, among other factors. I just have one other picture. This is a condo in South Seas. As you can see, it's extensive dune system and limited infrastructure damage. This is a very brief presentation by myself. If we have a minute, I can take questions. If not.
So if I saw that right, you said there was 650 cubic, whatever, sand drying, but only 50,000 was lost.
So we put almost 850,000 cubic yards of sand with the previous beach nourishment. That 50,000 was along the dry beach. So a lot of sand moved from the dry beach to the wet beach, so still within the system. Although, depending on time and how the waves act, that sand may be returned to the beach, or it may just float downstream.
So what is the plan to obviously get the dunes back in? Are you working with FEMA, or what's the plan to rebuild the dunes and all that?
Yes, there are actually several factors at play with that. The first of which being a funding mechanism. We've made application to both FEMA as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. Following the hurricane, FEMA has made a redetermination or a reinterpretation of the regulations. And because the beach of Captiva was initially constructed as an Army Corps of Engineers project, it has to go through their review first to see if they'll provide us some assistance. And it's currently within legal review of their system. Hopefully we will hear back shortly. If the Army Corps declines to provide us assistance, we will re-engage with FEMA and provide a path forward with our engineers.
So maybe a year or two.
Probably.
Oh, sorry.
What about any of the money that the governor allocated for beach nourishment after Ian?
Our office has made application for legislative appropriations. We've got an application for roughly, of course, I'm up here and I don't have the numbers, roughly $6.8 million. Plus,
So my understanding is that we think to renourish the beach completely is about $12 million. Where do you want to be seen? Where you are.
I need some camera time.
Roughly $12 million. And even though we say it's only 50,000 cubic yards of sand within the system, a lot of it went into the water. And many of us feel like a lot of it went onto our properties probably and all over the place. So we are attempting to renourish the dunes to what they used to be, even though we have a lot of sand in the water. Okay, that's what we are putting in funding requests for. We are working the process on funding. You go from here to there to here to there to here to there. Sort of like some of our insurance claims, I think. But we are working that, and I feel comfortable with doing everything right to make sure we get that money and our beaches restored. I think we have the support of our county government to make that happen. Working in Tallahassee, working here, working there. I have never felt that we're not going to make it happen. You agree? Jay agrees, so it must be true. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to start?
This may take a little longer than our usual evening presentations. I hope you'll be into it with us. We've got quite a few things we wanted to share with you, and then hear from you. So it may take a little longer. We've got a lot of things to talk about. Okay, so here's the Captiva timeline. In the beginning, day -1, we got the evacuation notice for Captiva. Day 0, we had a landfall with a category 4 to 5 in Cayo Casto, a category 4 storm, and a curfew was issued for Lee County. You all remember where you were day 0 and what was happening? It's one of those things I'll never forget. I had friends who called me and said Captiva's gone. Unfortunately, I believed him at that time. Day 0. This is from the Campbells. They live on Binder. These are some photographs they took during the storm. That's what it was looking like, and you can see the inundation. Next, this was, again, during the storm, the water was flowing, and all of a sudden there was a big surge of water that came down Old Lodge Lane. So I have a little video. It's very short, so watch quickly right now, and perhaps you can see the water flowing down Old Lodge Lane. That's what they were seeing. And that was probably, there was some kind of blowout up at the top of Leica, and the water started pouring through. Never be seen before video footage. And then the next morning we woke up and we thought, okay, how are we gonna go about doing this? And then we realized that the causeway had collapsed. And that was, oh my. This is another picture from day 1. This is Carol Campbell here, for those of you who know her. And if you can see over on the right, that's part of the new Rauschenberg building. And so we're looking south on Captiva Drive. And that's what the guys had to get out of there so that we can get up and down the roads. Here's what it looked like in Sunset Captiva at the beginning of that day. We don't have pictures of day 2 because they were gone from the island then. Okay. And here's our fire department and sheriffs coming back on the island. And this is not really you guys, but it was close. And they start doing search and rescue and get everybody taken care of and things secure for us. The first week continued. By day 3, Captiva Drive and all the roads in the village were open. On day 5, CEPD and Aptum, that's our engineering company, and the Army Corps of Engineers were on island. They came around to the Gulf side and they were looking at the beaches to see what was the damage, what do we need to do here, what do we need to worry about, how are things going. So day 5, they were there. And on day 7, we had Starlink towers, which are temporary cell towers delivered to the islands. I could never make that stuff work, but maybe somebody else got some communications out of those. So that was week 1. Week 2, the fire department, heavy equipment returned to Captiva on the barges. I don't know when some of our owners started coming in. I don't know if Jeff was getting his boat in and over at that point in time. He could have done. Day 9, National Guard leaves, and the first LCEC trucks arrive via a barge. And then the miracle occurs is on October 11th, day 13, the causeway opened to emergency vehicles. Amazing. Next day, the FGUA, those are the wastewater plant people, returned to monitor the South Seas wastewater treatment plant and get it going with generators. And none of us ever believed that a group of trucks would be so beautiful, would we? And this is them coming back onto across the causeway to start working on our electricity. So after 2 weeks, the island was secure. The roads were opened. We had roofs being tarped. Causeway was open, and we had crews working to restore our water, our power, our communications, and our wastewater plants. Pretty darn good. The next 2 weeks, we got to almost utilities point of view. We had limited water service, which meant boil water. The Lee County schools reopened, and our kids went off islands to go to school on the mainland. The Causeway reopened to some residents and contractors, very limited access. The main power lines to Captiva were re-energized. It didn't mean your house had it, but we had the big power lines, and it was all prioritized as to where the power went and who got the power first. By day 24, we had the wastewater treatment plant at South Seas restored. And then day 27, we had debris removal expanded to the entire island of Captiva by a Crowder Gulf. And just in case some of you forgot what it looked like. And this is what for those of you who weren't here, this is what it really looked like. And some of us would go up and down looking for ping pong tables to see if it really worked, and we could scavenge some of the things in somebody's trash, but whatever. Okay, yeah, no, it was pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Weeks 5 and 6, power and water came back. Causeway access open to all island residents and contractors on day 33. On day 34, the CCA opened and made it an internet hotspot with air conditioning. Wow, wow, wow. That was wonderful. And I believe we had toilets too. It was just an amazing event over here. So, and it became a gathering place for people on the island. Day 40, the water, we no longer had to boil. And our CEPD started the beach claim with FEMA on day 41. And then those were sort of the big things. And then from week 17 to March 15th, what we were doing is reopening our island. We got hurricane passes on day 61 for employees of reopening businesses, so the business could reopen. We needed people to be able to work in the businesses. On day 12, Carol returned to the post office. And, and she was delivering mail before the post office opened. She came around and come and see us. She's an amazing person. Comcast service was mostly restored on and off. We all know about that. Sanibel Causeway opened totally for the public January 2nd. January 5th, curfew was rescinded, and January 26th, the Mucky Duck reopened. You had to have cash, and the menu was limited, but it reopened, and that's a big part of our island as well. Day 131, we requested the money for the beach. And day 133, our Sanibel school reopened, and then we had Starbucks reopening on February 28th. I talked to the South Seas guys, and they said, we're not making any money on that now. They opened it up for the community, for the workers, and for us to feel good that we have our Starbucks, and it's more a return to normalcy, which was what our island's about. And then we opened the beach park reopened on day 11. So that's sort of our timeline through this. And so the question we have is, how did we do? What did we learn? What do we need to do better? Well, if you had asked me quite a while ago if we were going to be able to withstand a 7-foot surge, I didn't think so. We took a Category 5 storm It knocked us over and we're back up. And I think it's amazing. I think we have tremendous people on the island, the people who take care of us, like Mike, like Chief Powell, like Carol, they take good care of us. Like Emily, who comes in and drives in, even though she has no place to stay on the islands anymore, she drives in to get us in the net. And we all work together. So here's my opinions, and some people have talked to opinions as to what worked. Our fire and sheriff's departments were spectacular. Our beach and dunes did very, very. Our elevated buildings do work. Yes, they do. Metal roofs do work, as you can see by the number we're all putting on. New construction works. The communications from the panel, and here I'm going to do a shout out for Ken, shy as he is. The email we got, which were the notices from the panel as to what was going on, they were my lifeline. They were crucial as to what's happening. And I think that was a tremendous part of us all coming together and knowing what was going on and not being so stressed out about it. I think looking at Sanibel, and they had their meetings, and we could watch Holly Smith be sort of the voice of hope and action. I think that worked. The Lee County and Captiva relationships work. And here I'm going to call out David Mintz, who worked really hard along with Bob Walter to get us what we needed when we needed it. So, and I would like to thank David for all he did. Yes, David was crucial to this recovery, to our recovery. And the CGPD, they were out there and they were going and they were hitting the ground running. And we moved it along, and we're in great shape to get the money and to restore the dunes. What to improve? The first thing I see, and people I've talked to, is we had a lot of pathways through the dunes. Where we had low points, the water bursts through, and it's called a blowout. So when we're off trying to get money here, we're trying to get money for walkovers and safer things for all the public access points. We'd also like to suggest to all people who have pathways through the dunes to try to minimize them, because they're just weak points in our defense system. I also think telecommunications was a little weak, as in very weak, and we have to come up with some better solutions there for next time. Someone suggested that on Sanibel, they brought in a Comcast hotspot in a trailer. Well, one of those parked at McCarthy's probably would have been very nice for us all. And this is just Bob at South Sea suggested that he took too long in figuring out how to get all the emergency equipment available from South Seas to the island to help out with the island. So it should be more part of our regular emergency procedures. So those are my opinions and some of my friends' opinions. And now what we want to do is go into this interactive, high-tech phase and hear what you have to say. There will also be an open mic at the end for anybody who wants to, for all of you who would like to share with us, okay? So here we go. So get your cell phones out, and here we go.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to help us basically collect some information from you all. And we will get through this. We will get through the tech together. But give me just a moment. And we are going to switch to okay. So we're going to use a tool called Menti. It's an interactive tool. And the reason we like to do this is a couple things, is because this is a really great way to collect information that then is really easy for us to download and take a look at after. And also the other thing that's pretty neat about this is you'll be able to see everyone's input and live results as we do this. So the first thing you may want to do, just for a little bit more dependable connection, is you may want to make sure that you've got your phone logged on to the Wi-Fi here. We noted that probably everybody already has been on the Wi-Fi here before and will probably connect right away, but take just a moment. Okay, and there are multiple networks here. You want the one that is in all capital letters. So CCAHALL, all capitals. And for those of you at home, thank you for bearing with us. We will be moving on to instructions in just a moment. So, okay. All right, so I'm going to keep us moving. Okay. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, so here's what you're going to do is we're going to have you go to a website. There's two ways you can do this. You can either scan the QR code, but if you don't want to do that, you can open a browser. Okay, so you open a website and you're going to go to www.menti, and Menti is spelled MENTI.com. And you'll enter this code, and I'll read off the code as well for anybody that has any trouble reading this in just a second. But again, you go to the website www.menti.com. And you're going to see a little bar, and it's going to want you to enter some numbers. And the numbers you're going to enter are 6795 5091. So again, I'll read off that code. And the nice thing is that I can tell some of you are already getting on because you see the little icon in the right with the little thumbs up. That means people are starting to get on the website here. 15 of you, okay, lots of thumbs up, 16. Okay. 17, okay. All right, I'm going to give it just a few more seconds and then we'll try our first question. But right now I'm seeing people are having some luck getting on. If you're finding that you are having any major challenge, we do have paper-based versions of the survey, but we would like you to try this tool if you could. Okay. Okay. All right, any questions about getting on this before I go to the first question? I'll give Jay a second here, but any questions? Okay, we're continuing to get more people. Okay, so again, that's www.menti.com. And the code is 6795 5091. Okay, am I okay to go to the first question? Okay. Okay, and I see some people already started to answer this. So this is a question to get you a little warmed up. So pre-storm, you consider yourself, and you can choose any of the categories that apply to you. And I would assume that the first two categories are the ones that are going to make most sense for you. Okay. So right now we've got about 30 people on for interacting with this. Okay, 34, 35. Excellent. Okay. All right, so right now I've seen that the numbers kind of leveled out here. Is everyone almost 39? 40. All right, I'm going to give it just a second because I see a few more people hopping on here. Okay, 42. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move us on to the next question. Okay, and let me give you a little explanation for this. This should be a little bit more visible on your phone. What we're trying to find out is a little bit about how you were impacted by the storm. So the first is short-term displacement, and there's multiple options here. So if you were displaced from your house for less than 30 days, if you were displaced between about a month and 3 months. Yeah, see, I see everybody figuring it out. If you're displaced between 3 and 4 months. Longer term displacement. Okay, we have business interruption and loss of income and difficulty navigating the insurance or the claim process. And again, you can choose as many of these as you want. Okay, I'll move on in just a second. I'm going to wait till we get a little closer to the 44 number at the bottom. Any last minute answers here? Okay. All right, next question. So this is an open-ended version of this question. This is to find out what we didn't capture in that last question for you. So what are the additional impacts that you experience that we haven't already captured? Anything that applies to you, go ahead and type into your phone so we can capture that. And what you're going to see here is this is all anonymized, but you're going to see a feed of what other people have to say. And if something occurs to you, if I remember correctly, you should be able to put in more than one answer to this as well. Right, so excellent. We're going to give a little bit more time here. So we're seeing loss of belongings, some social impacts. Christmas was far from family on the island, loss of revenue. Okay. Loss of landscaping, landscape destruction. Dealing with Comcast. Okay. Daughter's wedding had to be canceled. Difficulty finding out how much we can raise the cottage. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. I'm trying to give everybody space to get some answers. That's a tough one. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. We keep getting a little bit more in here. All right. Okay, so the next question. In what ways was the post-hurricane response on Captiva effective? So much like Linda went through some of her thoughts, now here's an opportunity for you to share your thoughts. So where did things go well in the post-hurricane response on Captiva? Just gonna hit enter so we can start to see the. See a lot of agreement with some of what Linda noted. So our first responders doing an incredible job, people helping one another. Quick access to the island, good communications. Rapid return of utilities. A lot about the communications piece. A lot of kudos to the fire and sheriff department. The guy who was sending live videos from Captiva. Facebook private groups for info. That's an interesting one. Yeah, the lunch ladies. A lot of good feedback for the community panel. Okay, I'm just going to see if there's any final answers here. Okay, I'm going to move us. I'm going to move us in just a second here to the next question. Okay, so you can probably imagine what the next question is going to be after this one. So in what ways was in what ways was post-hurricane response in Captiva effective? Our next question is what should be improved about the post-hurricane response in Captiva? Okay, rapid restoration of video feeds, telecommunications. I can't think of one thing, and that's fair too. Information on reliable, honest contractors. Right, so we're seeing a lot around the communications for telecommunications. Okay, so I see thematically we're definitely leaning in on the communications side here. Stockpile supplies for our first responders, mail service. Okay, telecommunications. Okay. I noticed a couple things about beach cleanup. Okay, I'm gonna give it just a couple more. Just kind of seeing if we have a few more stragglers in here. Emergency plan, quick Wi-Fi in the island. And then we have one final question for you here that we'd like your feedback on. Okay, so our final question for you is, what should the community panel and CEPD be working on that should say to improve our future? I apologize that it is missing that word, but to improve our future. Okay, so again, the question is, what should the community panel and CEPD be working on to improve our future? Not sure how that word got left out. Okay. Removal of debris on beaches. Okay. Right, so I see some long-term sort of thinking here. So long-term resilience plan, our dunes, the sewer project, utilities. I think we see the communications theme and the communications infrastructure showing up here again. Okay, beach renourishment. Okay, some focus on utilities. Okay, so what I might do here is I might stop sharing the screen. People, if they want to, could still fill in answers. But that way the video will be on Linda and she'll be able to open things up for questions.
Carrie, thank you so much. This is Carrie's project. I think it was fantastic. So thank you. I enjoyed. It was very good for me to see everybody. I hope you'll also too. Now, is there anyone with some burning desires here who would like to make a few comments or share something else? We've got an open mic here. Okay. Oh, yes. Let me get that.
One question was, how many people stayed on Captiva initially and rode out the hurricane and didn't evacuate?
So, Sheriff Mike.
I don't have a count for you right off the top of my head.
You have some guesses on how?
I mean, there were some people at Green Waters and a few other people up and down the island, but something like that, I think would be about right.
Okay. And it's funny.
20-ish, something.
Okay, any other question? Yes.
Sure. I'm just wondering if there was much looting here on the island at all. Was that a problem here? Because I've heard it was really bad on Seattle.
Well, one of the things that we were able to do is use a curfew to interact with anybody moving around at night. I know there were some people that didn't really love the curfew. They wanted it gone at some point. But we made 0 arrests for curfew violations. What it did was it gave us a reason to interact with anybody. And a lot of the people, there's probably even a few of you here in the room that would stop by us. And you know that you're just, sent back to your house. But what it did was it kept the people that were out creeping on alert for us. We just tried to interact with anybody we saw, try to figure out what they were doing out here, who belonged out here. The fact that the causeway was down for the initial part of it, kept some of it under control. But also because the island just kind of the nature and shape of it, we were able to see a lot. So we had one reported residential burglary. We made one reported. And really, no, I mean, we had a couple things, walk off from the edges of the road that some people said, oh, I wasn't actually throwing that away. It was stuck on the side of the road. So we were trying to hit with anybody that was out here. A lot of them were people working and just tell them, don't remove anything. I mean, whether you think it's trash or not, just don't be caught carrying anything that's not yours. And if you have something in your hands, you better be able to tell us exactly who told you you could have it. And we better be able to recontact them to confirm it. So
That's wonderful. Thank
I
you.
wanted to compliment the sheriff. I was here just in early October. And the sheriff's department was everywhere. But very low key in the background, was reassuring. You did a great job.
well, thank you. I mean, first and foremost, we weren't taking the attitude of trying to be an occupying force or be repressive to our residents. It was exactly the opposite. We were out here trying to be as helpful as possible and try to let everybody back into their houses as quickly as possible. I got that. I got some feedback.
Any other comments or?
Yeah, I'm not sure who was responsible, but it might have been FEMA, it might have been before, but the mounds of bottled water were a lifesaver, and the food were lifesavers, and the porta potties, whatever, Chinese Square, a wonderful lifesaver before there was electricity and water on the island. And I'm not sure how that happened so quickly, but I do want to do a shout out for, because that really was a lifesaver. We came on the end of October or mid-October, and that was a lifesaver.
Because I don't live on the island, I did not fill out the survey, but I want you to all know that our federal, our state, and our local governments really worked together. And they may fight with each other all the rest of the time, but for this storm, all three of them worked together, and we should be very proud of your elected officials and also all the people that work for them, because they made that. Yes.
Well, thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.